Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 345. We're going to add some more context to the Kevin Rudd story as Peter Dutton, who is the Home Affairs Minister in Australia, comes out and says that Mr. Rudd's version is not very credible. That is the same exact thing I said yesterday when this story first broke. I don't find anybody credible who says that they don't know where a $650,000 donation came from. Are you kidding me right now? So you're the head of this organization. You're the big man on campus. And you don't ask any questions where $650,000 came from. And then when you get those answers, you don't do your own research to figure out who this person is that's dropping this hefty sum in your lap. I don't buy it. And neither does Mr. Peter Dutton. It's nice to see that other politicians are calling out these guys for their BS. I mean, how long are we going to see politicians cover for each other when it comes to shit like this? Seems to always be the case, right? So it's kind of refreshing to see Peter Dutton here, who, I'll be very frank and honest with you, I don't know much about Australian politics. I've said that several times. I'm not somebody who really dives into the finer points of politics in other countries for the most part, besides the Middle East. So I'm certainly not an expert on Australian politics, but Peter Dutton, who the Home Affairs Minister here, is he's definitely on the right track. He definitely has the right idea here, in my opinion. And the fact that Mr. Rudd thinks that people are going to believe he had no idea about that money is a bit ludicrous to me. So let's jump into this Daily Mail article and let's add a little context and let's add a little meat to the bone. Headline: Peter Dutton says it is not credible Kevin Rudd didn't know about the $650,000 donation from convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. And that's a pretty straightforward statement, huh? Buddy, you're not credible. You saying that you didn't have any idea about where that money came from is a fairy tale. This article was authored by Brittany Chain and Charlotte Karp. Peter Dutton is cast doubt upon Kevin Rudd's claims he had no idea billionaire pedophile Jeffrey Epstein donated $650,000 to his peace think tank. So again, what the hell does Jeffrey Epstein know about world peace? What is Jeffrey Epstein? He had his finger on the pulse of the geopolitical situation around the world. He was also the greatest financier in the world. He was also the smartest man in the room. I mean, is that what you would have us believe? Because guess what? The facts don't align with that line of thinking. All right, Jeffrey Epstein only donated money to these organizations when he thought he'd get something on the flip side, or when he already got a favor and this was the payback. Now, there's no evidence of that yet, but I'm sure if the digging is done and the investigative work is done, well, we'll find all of it. The problem is getting the legacy media on board. I'm hoping that after the election, and after all the hubbub dies down a bit, that they actually return to focus on journalistic stories such as this. Because what we see now coming from the legacy media is straight garbage, a dumpster fire. The former prime minister doubled down on his claim he was blindsided when he learned the now-dead sex offender, pedophile, donated the exorbitant sum to New York International Peace Institute. Of course he did. Well, I have no idea how he got this money. Jeffrey Epstein, I've never heard of him. I have no clue that he was such a vile person. Meanwhile, remember, this was the ex-Prime Minister of Australia. I'm sure you just don't fall into that job. I'm sure you have to be relatively intelligent to get that gig. At least intelligent enough to use Google. At least intelligent enough to vet the people that are donating to you. Perhaps his campaigns should be looked at now, and we should look at where all of his donations came from. I am so sick of this dark money. I am so sick of this laundered money playing such a huge, crucial role in politics around the world. But the Home Affairs Minister said Mr. Rudd's version of events is not credible and called on him to release any information that links the notorious pedophile to his charity. I don't think that's too out of left field, right? I think that's an actually decent request. Why don't you come forward, release all the information you have that ties you to Jeffrey Epstein, and let's see what's what. But the thing we have to remember here is, if people were involved in any kind of criminal conduct, any kind of financial crimes, do you really think it was going to be claimed on their tax return? Of course not. So some digging's going to have to be done. Some investigative work is going to have to be done. And if Mr. Rudd's caught up with Jeffrey Epstein in any sort of financial crimes, well, then a criminal case has to be opened. These are the steps that need to be followed by the prosecution, and they're the ones that need to work their way through all of this muck and figure out who's a player and who is not here in this Jeffrey Epstein saga. Because if this was a normal situation and this was a normal criminal enterprise, all of these people that were caught up with him, that were caught up in doing business with him, would all be under the microscope. It's just not credible. Him saying he didn't know anything about this. He hasn't seen anything, Mr. Dutton said. It's $650,000. It's a massive donation. I feel that was my reaction, too. My initial reaction when we went through the first article yesterday. My initial reaction was, how in the hell don't you know about a $650,000 donation? I'm pretty sure that when somebody donates that sort of money to your charity or to your group or whatever sort of project you're working on, that's the kind of donation where you reach out to that person personally and speak with them. Did Mr. Rudd do that? Are there records of that? Mr. Epstein was a very significant character, and Mr. Rudd needs to detail all of the information because people want confidence and faith in the work that his group is doing. But at the moment, Mr. Rudd has more questions than he's got answers. Well, I'm sorry to break the news to you there, sir, but most of these guys have more questions than answers. And most of the people involved, they won't even answer any questions. They'll give you some sort of canned response, or their hired PR team will give you some sort of canned response. And so the story goes. And it seems like the game plan is the same no matter what continent we're on. Be it Europe, be it America, in Australia, and elsewhere, it's always the same story. I didn't know anything. I had no idea who Jeffrey Epstein was. Epstein was already a convicted sex offender who had served time in jail when he started donating to the Institute between 2011 and 2019. 8 years of donations. $650,000. And Mr. Rudd would have you believe that he had no idea. Well, listeners in Australia, I'm speaking specifically to you right now. Are you buying this? Do you believe this? Or do you think that he's telling stories, that Mr. Rudd is lying, and he knew that Jeffrey Epstein was an unsavory character? He knew that Jeffrey Epstein was a sick sex offender? But they didn't care because guess what? Without that money, without the life's blood of politics, well, how could he go about stealing more money? It's all a shell game to me at this point. I am so disgusted by so-called polite society that I just don't trust any of them. And at this point, I don't take any of them at their word either. They've been lying to us for so long. They've been exploiting us for so long. How can anyone possibly listen to anything that comes out of so-called polite society at this point? The disgraced hedge fund manager committed suicide, allegedly, in his jail cell in August 2019 after being arrested on child sex trafficking charges. Mr. Rudd has chaired the charity for 6 years, joining in June 2014 after losing the Australian federal election, but swore he wasn't aware of the link to Epstein. Again, I don't believe that. Now, was Jeffrey Epstein just such a peaceful man that he needed to donate this $650,000 to promote world peace? Or did he donate this money to an ex-prime minister's charity for access purposes, to purchase access, to make sure that he had access to any of the politicians he needed to get to, lobbyists, etc., etc., etc.? I mean, with all that we know, with all of the people Epstein has been involved with all of the behind-the-scenes financial douchebaggery that we have seen, do you really think that this was just a donation out of the kindness of his heart? And I think Mr. Rudd needs to answer for any sort of access that Epstein might have gained due to the charity, due to donating to the charity. What sort of contacts did he make from it? We need a full accounting. And Mr. Rudd has nobody to blame but himself. There is no way in hell you should be taking $650,000 from a convicted sex offender. Mr. Rudd said he first became aware of Epstein's donations from reports by the Norwegian press in November of 2019. The source of these donations had not previously been disclosed to the board, nor to me as chair, he said on Wednesday. Okay, well, who knew? If you didn't know, and the board didn't know, and the charity didn't know, what did you have, a minimum wage worker who just works the phone lines? Decided that we're going to take this donation for $650 large, and we're not going to let anybody know. We're just going to deposit it in the bank account, and it will show up on the ledger as a surprise? Is that what happened? Because I don't know how nobody in charge knew where this donation came from. Sure doesn't seem like reality to me. Mr. Rudd said he found the donations deeply disturbing, particularly because of IPI's work combating human trafficking and sexual violence. You think? A little concerning, huh? How in the hell do these sorts of so-called charities continue to operate? They should all be audited. Every single one of these charities that was related to Jeffrey Epstein in any way whatsoever. If you ever received one single dollar from Jeffrey Epstein, your charity, quote-unquote charity, needs to be audited, because I don't believe any of this shit, okay? I don't believe any of these people who said they didn't know, and all of these people use their charities as armor to wrap themselves in whenever shit goes south. He insisted the charity give the same amount as Epstein's donation to programs to support survivors of human trafficking and sexual assault. That's always the story, right? Oh, well, we're going to donate the money to this charity or that charity, or... That doesn't make up for the fact that you took the money in the first place. You should have vetted better. You should have done a better job tracking that money. We do not believe we should have anything to do with the funds from such an odious character, an appalling character, as Epstein, Mr. Rudd said. Yeah, well, that ship has sailed. You already took this money, and you took it over an 8-year period. So it's kind of hard for anyone to rationally sit here and think that you really care all of a sudden. You don't care. You care that you got caught. You care that you got put on blast, just like the rest of so-called polite society. Anyone donating to the IPI from now on would also have to pass a good character test. Epstein's links with celebrities and world leaders were examined following his death, which was ruled as a suicide, allegedly. So now anyone who's donating to IPI has to do a character test? So they just decided to put that into play? That didn't mean anything previously? That wasn't one of the stipulations you would have right away to avoid a situation like this? Of course it wasn't, because, well, how are they going to collect their few percent off the top and wet their beak from unsavory characters if people have to take a character test? Powerful people including Prince Andrew, Donald Trump, and Bill Clinton have all been linked to the billionaire hedge fund manager, pedophile, in some way, all of whom deny any wrongdoing. On October 14th, Norwegian media outlet DN reported that IPI president and a good friend of Mr. Rudd, Terry Rod Larson, had borrowed $130,000 from Epstein in 2013. You know, we talked about that as well, and I was talking about how good of a job that DN, the outlet, did with their reporting. They were all over it, right? They tracked it down, they provided receipts, and they really laid it out. And how many of these European politicians that we haven't even talked about yet took money from Jeffrey Epstein, were in bed with Jeffrey Epstein in some regard? I'm sure there's a lot more that's going to come out, folks, as the trees continue to shake and as the doors get kicked in. Neither the loan nor its repayment had been previously disclosed to the board or to me as chair, Mr. Rudd said. Of course not. They all operate as if they're mini kings in their small fiefdoms. All of these members of so-called polite society. They all feel like they're above the law. They feel like the two-tier justice system was completely built for them. One set of rules for our would-be rulers, and then another set of rules for us, the peons, the plebes. Mr. Rod Larson has apologized to the board for what he described as his grave error of judgment. Well, I think that if I was on the board, I would demand that we have nothing to do with this man ever again. Considering his poor decision-making, why would you want him anywhere involved with you or your organization at this point? Despite going to an event in New York in 2013 to honor the Mongolian president that Epstein also attended, Mr. Rudd said he has no recollection of meeting the financier. Pedophile? Yeah, no, I'm sure they never met. They never shook hands. They never were introduced. Jeffrey Epstein, Mr. I'm going to donate $650,000 to your charity, was never introduced to you, huh? Not at all. Never once. Such an absolute joke. And the worst part is some people still buy this shit. Some people are still buying what the legacy media is selling, and I don't understand it. They blatantly ignore stories that are impactful. They willfully trash people in the media for having a different opinion than them. It is just an absolute shit show. There's no more exposés. There's no more really good journalism. And you see it by how all of these politicians were able to slink around and hang out with Jeffrey Epstein. And none of these people in the media thought that would be a good story, huh? None of these people thought, maybe I should dig a little deeper here. Until Donald Trump was elected, hired Acosta, and the Miami Herald dove in. Up until that point, nobody gave two shits. That is a fact, folks. All right? That is a fact. So now, when we have the legacy media try and dip their toe into this story and act as if they know what's what, well, I find it laughable. This is just the guest list, and it cannot be confirmed for certain who was actually there, he said. No, not at all. The guest list means nothing. A 10-person guest list, and Jeffrey Epstein didn't go. He had no desire to go and meet up with all you politicians, right? Because he's never offered you anything off the cuff. He's never given you donations. Why would Jeffrey Epstein want to meet movers and shakers? Give me a break. Mr. Rudd also denied taking payment of $100,000 for advising the Mongolian government on security because the only thing he did was participate in a conference call in 2014. Well, I don't know one way or the other, but I'm pretty sure that the Mongolian government isn't just handing out $100,000 for you to be on a phone call with them. Pretty sure you probably did some work for them. Epstein and Mr. Rudd were two of the 10 participants in the conference call, but he said he understood neither took any money for it. Okay, sure. Again, all of these people are just so nice. They're just so helping. They always want to lend a hand. So they just donate their time. They go on these conference calls and they don't expect anything in exchange. It's not like they're power brokers. It's not like they're exchanging information on a daily basis as a commodity. No, not these people. Mr. Rudd declared all dealings the IPI had with Mr. Epstein would be thoroughly investigated by one of the big four accounting firms. Any significant engagement with someone as odious as Epstein must be taken seriously and investigated thoroughly. Yeah, it must be. But the question is, are you people capable of doing it? Thus far, all of these agencies and organizations who thought that it would be a good idea to have a quote-unquote third-party investigation, well, those investigations have proved to be lacking. They have come up short and they have missed key details. So, if you're relying on this so-called independent investigation to clear you, I think you're going to need to collect a few more receipts. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And for all of you that have donated to the PayPal, again, thank you very much. Remember, folks, tomorrow is the day. The new podcast kicks off tomorrow. I'm putting some of the finishing touches on the first episode right now, and I am pumped to bring you the first episode of Unsolved But Not Forgotten, starting tomorrow, where we will take a look at cold cases, unsolved cases, and just straight up weird, mysterious disappearances. As for me, I'll be back later on, and we will pick this back up where we left off.